Hi, my name is Alana. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And on this channel, we review books. And this particular video is a book review of Paul by Daisy Lafarge that I read over the summer. And so I'm finally getting around to knocking off some of my summer reads and reviews. It's been a busy autumn, and so it's taking me some time to catch up on all of those things. So let's dive right in because I don't want to belabor my intro. And whose permission had he asked to take her photo? So in Paul by Daisy Lafarge, this is her debut novel. She does have, I believe, a poetry collection that she won an award for, actually. And so it's narrated by the main character's point of view. Her name is Frances. And side note, Frances does go to France. Her name is spelled like France, which is a little, I believe so, which to me was a little bit too obvious. We're going to talk about that in a minute towards the end. She is an English graduate student who does go to rural France one summer to work the land and distract herself from an embarrassing incident that has recently happened to her in Paris. She ends up volunteering at a farm owned by a man named Paul. And Frances gets pulled into Paul's visceral orbit. However, she learns that Paul is harboring a dark inclination. From the beginning of the novel, or the beginning of the narrative, it's clear that Frances is don't be emailing me nothing, man. I'm on leave. Call the police. So it's clear that Frances is being infantilized, and this is a major hint about how Paul is off. And Lafarge did base Paul off of the French artist Paul Gauguin. I hope I pronounced that somewhat right. It was known that particular artist, he traveled the world, like places like Tahiti, and he had an affinity for underage girls. So that Lafarge is not hiding that at all. And Frances's incident in Paris puts her in a mentally and emotionally vulnerable state. And that vulnerability results in her having a lot of childlike mannerisms, which is why she tends to appeal to Paul. And so Frances is associated often with colors like white to symbolize innocence, a type of innocence. And she's also associated with a lot of other imagery and mannerisms that are very childlike and emphasize dependence. I do have to critique this because it's not the analogy of Frances being childlike for me that bothered me. It was the fact that Lafarge is too heavy-handed with this. She could have used the symbolism and not kept, and she didn't have, she could have just used the symbolism. The symbolism was good, but she repeats the word child and girl over and over again. We get it. Like, we get the gist and the imagery, but it becomes tedious to the reader because it's just too heavy-handed. And it's almost like when an author doesn't trust that they're getting the point across, whether that's what Daisy Lafarge meant or not, that's how it came across. It came across as a bit insecure. What did he mean by amenable? Images from yesterday flashed through my mind of the men working on the Capitol as Paul and I arrived on our bikes. Mine stickered with flowers, ribbons, streaming, girlish. The sound of their laughs as I retreated, the hot stones warmed by the sun, a familiar lump rises in my throat. Again, see, all we needed was stickered with flowers, ribbons, streaming. We would get that was a child's bike that she was riding, and that would make her in turn look and seem younger. We didn't need the word girlish after it. We get it. She peels the stained t-shirt over my head and helps me slip on the new one. It smells faintly of lavender and talcum powder, familiar and alien at the same time. I feel like a child being dressed for my first day at school, and as she tugs it down my waist, I don't want her to let go of me. I wish she would slow the moment down and make it last indefinitely. Again, we didn't need to know that she felt like a child. It was obvious, with scents of lavender and talcum powder, which are associated with babies. A lot of baby skincare and products are scented that way. We could have just crossed out, I feel like a child being dressed for my first day of school. Cross that out and just say she tugs it down over my waist, etc. Because we know that she's getting undressed by a woman that's older than her and dressed again. So because her clothes got ruined in a particular incident, and so this woman's helping her change, we don't need that she felt like a child. The symbolism was enough. I feel awkward at first, but soon abandon myself to dancing giddily with the girls. There's something safe about it, as if by dancing with them, I become one of them, a child of whom no one expects anything. It was so tiring having a woman's body. I like to slip out of it and shrink back down to a child's size. Again, it's so repetitive. We get it. We get it. Just have her dancing with the children and having fun and giggling while everybody else is dancing with adults. We get it. So tying into this theme of childhood is also this idea of consent. Children cannot give proper consent to certain things, and thus, because of their age, obviously, they cannot make informed. There are a lot of times that children cannot make informed decisions. They cannot give informed consent because their brains haven't finished developing yet, right? So there is this idea of consent and how children are easy to take advantage of because they are subject to those who have power over them. Again, because they're innocent, they are dependent. This goes back to Paul and his travels, and also how Paul is able to easily pull Frances under his influence. Because in this book also, this character, Paul, has traveled to a lot of tropical areas, warm climates, tribal areas, much like the artist, the actual artist. There is something uneasy, unsettling about it all. The children and families in the photos are clearly all aware of having their photo taken. So that can't be it. If the display is meant to be a celebration, why do all of the images and objects feel so lifeless? I didn't feel that I even had a choice. Everything seemed more like a relentless, inevitable stream. All I could do was flow downhill from the mountains, buoyed by the current running straight back to, oh no, how do I pronounce that? That French name there of this where she is. I will not butcher it. My French is horrible. What use would it be to swim upstream? Frances is a rather withdrawn character. She can be kind of opaque at times, even though she is narrating. The author kind of slowly builds up. It's not a long book, but she kind of takes her time, and not in a bad way. I think it's a good build up about what it is that happened to Frances in Paris. And so we see these instances in which Frances tends to go mute or blank. To me, this goes back to her infantilization. It's not uncommon for children who have difficulty articulating what's bothering them. So it's not uncommon for children to have difficulty articulating what's bothering them because maybe they're still learning how to express themselves with words at this point, depending on their age. However, I found these episodes of blankness to be somewhat shallow and maybe not fleshed out enough. I get what Lafarge was aiming for, but somehow the execution felt a little flat for me. Maybe it just wasn't expanded upon enough. Maybe we don't have enough of Frances's background. We get some of it, but maybe we need a little bit more of Frances to know why she tends to kind of disassociate in this way. As I watch the countryside slide past, I feel blankness settling like snow over the blurry view. Blankness, I can't think of another word for it. Articulation drips away from me like ice thawing. I don't fight it. I let the words melt and leave. I feel perfectly blank, formless, except for the shape I can make by curling around others. Aside from these themes, I decided to pull up for this review in some of my critiques. I do think that Lafarge clearly has a talent for writing. I did find her descriptions of the French countryside to be kind of cathartic and soothing. The lane ahead of us overspills with summer growth as the late afternoon sun filters through the canopy. Every now and then I catch glimpses of settlements through the trees, grand houses dilapidating quietly in the heat, bungalows sweltering under terracotta tiles, peach-colored pigment flaking from walls, garden chairs resting on patios, vegetable patches tamed into grids. Outside, the evening is cool and clear. The last whiffs of pink linger in the sky. The dogs of the village that had barked when we drove past earlier are quiet now, and the houses seem to reverberate slightly. Orange streetlights limn their boundaries. Orange streetlights limn their boundaries, tracing outlines of shutters warped with rain and azalea leaves pushing through fences. So there are these moments of really, really great scenic writing that I was like, oh, that's really good. That was pretty good. It was like, you could see it. She was really good at drawing to the reader's mind exactly what this landscape looks like. But overall, I did enjoy, despite the criticisms that I did enjoy my read of Paul. I do like to read debut novels because they often showcase the raw talent of an author or a writer. And it's easy, and even though it's easier to detect where this budding writer where some of their rough spots are, you can see the overall talent. And let's be real, writing is difficult. And there are times where I felt like Lafarge's editor also could have helped her tweak some of these things, because behind every good writer, and don't get me wrong, I think Lafarge is a good writer, behind every good writer is a really good editor. Who could have helped her kind of massage some of that things. Clearly, Lafarge is talented. And even though this wasn't necessarily the most memorable book for me, I do think that this is a perfect summer read for people who maybe want to read something set in the countryside. It's clearly hot, really good scenic writing of the summer landscape in rural France. And they like narratives that have really odd relationship dynamics, because the relationship between Paul and Frances is weird. And Paul is weird. And I hope that Lafarge continues, maybe writes another novel or writes a few more novels, because I would be curious to see how she continues to hone her craft through narratives rather than poetry, because I'm just not a big poetry reader. But I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5. It's not bad. Wasn't a standout for me, but it wasn't horrible. And I do think that this book has an audience. I'm going to keep it on my shelf because, again, there were some really well-written passages here that I think are worth going back and rereading. So that's all that I have for this book. Have you read this book? Yay, nay. It's not a book that is super hyped up. I think I see it occasionally on Instagram, but not a book that I see a ton of people talking about. So I wanted to make sure I got my review up. Please, yes. Feel free to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. Also, please feel free to follow me on Instagram, where I get up to more bookish shenanigans. All of my content goes there first. And I also like to post funny things in the Instagram stories, because life is bleak, is it not? Life is bleak. The world looks like it's going to hell in a handbasket. So it's healthy to have a good chuckle every now and then. You know what I mean? Even if you're laughing at silly animals doing goofy things. Anyway, that's my philosophy. It keeps the serotonin levels up a little bit. Anyway, I will catch you in the next one. Bye.